famous producer who in the late 50s and early 60s made radio history along with Ewan MacColl and Peggy Seeger with a series of highly innovative features known as the Radio Ballads. New Storytellers is introduced by Charles's daughter, Sarah Parker.
Hello, and now for the third in this series featuring the student winners of the Charles Parker Prize 2022. A prize dedicated to the memory of my dad, which has inspired others and myself to follow a career in audio. Goldsmith student Guy Gardner also found inspiration close to home. He wears a mask and his face grows to fit it. Is the story of his father, a retired police officer. Guy, who shares his name with his dad, uncovered a varied and challenging...
7076. 7076.
7066.
No, 7076.
7076.
Yeah.
Okay, just give me a minute.
It's alright, no worries. Thank you.
4 o'clock in the morning when I wake up, it's very real. It's there hanging in front of me. When I'm talking to you about it now, it's in a bubble because it's daylight and it's rationally remembering it. At night in the dreams you don't remember it rationally, you just hear the noise and you smell it.
Years ago, he decided to try and join the police. He had to produce guarantees of good character, and he had to have a certain physique, height and girth, and a high standard of physical fitness. Let's turn back the clock again to see how he became efficient.
There were two things I wanted to be when I was young, and my mother was always playing this back to me. One was I wanted to be a rancher in Australia and have a beard, and secondly, I wanted to be a police officer. My name is Guy Gardner. I spent 30 years as a police officer in the Kent County Constabulary. In that time, I did beat work, detective work, I was a traffic officer, and ultimately ended up as the Chief of Staff for the President of ACPO, working in London. I guess I almost had white knight on a charger type expectations. I had no idea. Here I am. I was issued on day one with my white charger. And I go onto the street on my white horse, and I go charging to the rescue. And you get thumped. And no one loves you.
There is a relationship in Britain of mutual trust and helpfulness between police and public. The lorry driver is bound to help the policeman, and the policeman exists to help the people.
We get spat at. She came down off the top of this thing with a 12-inch carving knife, and she stuck it in my stomach. You have community meetings, and people are chucking bricks through the windows, called out a gun, and he stuck it up my nose. You trust nobody in a pub fight. All I can see is this woman attacking you with this pickaxe handle. That's what we're being dished up with day after day after day. And it's that kind of feeling that actually the public are out there to get you. And so I was a very different person. I grew up because I've been brought up in a way that people are like this. There are criminals, there's the middle classes, there are the upper classes, and there's this and you do that, and so on and so forth. And it's not true. It's not true. I dealt with a member of the aristocracy who regularly used to pound his wife across the face, and you know, realize that everybody, every single one of us is prone to this, you know, can be criminals, can do things that are bad.
He's an expert, with brain as well as brawn, trained by experts, confident in his own experience, knew by his own. He knew how to handle a situation.
One of the things I never got over was delivering the death message. I got over virtually everything in the police service, but I never got over that. Having to go and knock on a door and say, your son is dead. You're turning up and you are going to give this person the most ghastly, this is perhaps going to be the worst day of their life. And you're going to be the one who triggers it. You walk up that garden path and someone's sitting behind that door and they're probably quite happy at the moment. And you're just going to destroy that, and they're going to break down in front of you, and you're not going to know what to do.
So now we understand why we call on a policeman in an emergency. The detection and prevention of crime is only one part of their function. More importantly than the safeguarding of property is the safeguarding of life.
The first one I dealt with was a young man of about, he must have been 20, had left his house, got on his motorbike, driven up the road and driven straight across a crossing and been killed. 2 hours after he left home, I'm knocking on Mum's door and saying your son who's just left is now dead. And of course, the way people react to that is incredibly different. Now, I've had people laugh because their mind instantly shuts down and says this is not happening. The other thing is just flat denial. No, it's not true. Anger. I had a mother attack me in her distress. You know, this is the whole thing about being a police officer is this segmentation that has to go on in your day. If you're in the military, you spend an awful lot of your time training for something that won't happen, hopefully. There is no belief that a soldier will be going out there in the field, shooting people 1 minute, next minute he'll be going and cuddling them and whatever. A police officer will be dealing with a riot. The riot is now over, and the police officer has to stop being a riot policeman. Next thing on the radio, you get a message to go and deliver a death message. And all that stuff here, that adrenaline, the aggression, the trauma, the feeling, the pain of being thumped in the gob, are in that compartment. And mustn't leak out. Because next thing, you must be empathetic, helpful, resourceful, and you're going to have to be able to pick yourself up, put yourself down, change your approach on the fly. I could do that, and it's almost as though you're someone else is doing it over there, and it's a role you play. I'm a jobbing actor, and I've got a job as a police officer that day, and I'm reading a script, and I'm da-da-da-da-da-da. But 20, 30 years on, you realise it does, you know, and some of those things are very, very difficult. Every police officer has got some things which stick in their mind, which you still dream about, you still wake up and you see them.
For instance, how to recognize a lost child.
There was a lake town down near the Western Docks in Dover. I had a call, I was on patrol, and I had a call that there was a missing child, a missing 4-year-old from some flats down there. And I wasn't the only one down there, but I went down there and I looked. The child had been playing in this play area, but when we looked at the play area, the fence was broken in one corner. Not immediately apparent when you looked around the place, only when you went and walked much more closely. There was a hole here, and we went through there. We went down to the railway line, and there was a body. He was wearing a blue plastic raincoat and sort of Wellington boots, just lying there. And I grabbed him, picked him up, and one of the Wellington boots stayed where it was. It turns out he'd been run over by a train, and it had cut his leg off. When something happens that's outside what might be called the natural order of things, you know, you're born, you grow up, you may get married, you may not, but you go on, you become old and you die, and you die before your children grieve you, and so on and so forth. And had it been an elderly person, it would have been horrid, it would have been gruesome, but it wouldn't have been that sense, the same sense of wrongness and outrage there. Picking him up, and the boot staying there, you know, that's so... Actually, that's the thing I remember most of all. The stuff about it, I'm reconstructing in my mind, and I'm not sure about the verity of it, but I do remember that. I look back now, and I realised that some of the things I dealt with were highly traumatic, and I now know that I have elements of PTSD and so on and so forth, none of which were applied in those days for police officers. I tried to deal with it so that the bit in the middle of me wasn't affected, so I still had that humanity, and I had this shell, this crust that took the knife blades, that took the shouting, that took the spitting, that actually still allowed me to empathise with that poor woman in front of me who just lost her son.
He's mastered the situation, of any situation, because he's mastered his job. And it's an executive job. A job that's called for knowledge, courage, a good memory, quick decisions, and a great deal of kindly tolerance.
How I see those memories now. In a bubble. Each one's in a bubble. Now, I'm sure a psychiatrist would say that's a protective act and so on and so forth, and they're probably right, but depends. 4 o'clock in the morning when I wake up, it's very real. It's there hanging in front of me, and I'm talking to you about it now. It's in a bubble, because it's daylight, and it's rationally remembering it. At night, in the dreams, you don't remember it rationally. You just hear the noise and you smell it. I don't know, a lot of the time I don't try and remember. Only when someone like you comes along and asks me, do I actually face them? And I don't know what impact they have on me now. I don't know. I don't know. Probably more than I think.
He Wears a Mask and His Face Grows to Fit It was produced by Guy Gardner, a student at Goldsmiths College, University of London. New Storytellers is a soundscape production for BBC Radio 4.
New Storytellers is presented by Sarah Parker. This episode was originally broadcast in 2022. From next Monday, our new book of the week will be in its new slot of weekday mornings at 11:45, so you'll still be able to hear first-class readings of exciting new titles here on Radio 4. And if you're a night owl and prefer to listen at midnight, there's no change. Curl up with the likes of Cloistered My Years as a Nun by Catherine Coldstream. That's our new book of the week in its new slot of weekdays at 11:45 in the morning and again at midnight. The leader of the Taliban has declared on state television that women who commit adultery will be stoned to death. Woman Zahra speaks to the former Deputy Speaker of the Afghan Parliament, who was the first woman to hold the position. That's coming up after the news here on Radio 4.
Instant messaging social and professional lives faster, more casual, and more confused.
There was no forward thinking, at least on my part, about any psychological impact on this.
I'm Helen Lewis, and in a new 6-part series, I'll be taking a deep dive into these secret worlds. I'll meet a woman who married a chatbot.
100%, I would never go back to humans, ever again.
And discover how military secrets were shared on a forum about a computer game.
Look at me, I've got these secret military documents. Everyone thought, okay, that's cool.
Helen Lewis has left the chat. Starts on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds. Next Wednesday morning at 9:30.
BBC News at 10 o'clock. A review of the circumstances surrounding the murder of a 10-month-old boy by his parents has concluded that professional interventions should have protected him. Finley Bowden was found dead at his home in Derbyshire on Christmas Day 2020. His parents, who had a history of drug abuse and violence, were jailed last year. Finley was removed from their care at birth but later returned to them. The review carried out by Derby and Derbyshire Safeguarding Children Partnership said Finley should have been one of the most protected children in the local authority area. Our correspondent Sean Dilley said the parents were able to conceal problems from the authorities.
As the time progressed, social workers and others believed that the parents had been making positive steps forward. This is something also that was supported by an independently appointed guardian who reported the same to the court. In fact, the report was also quite critical that there was an over-reliance on parents' assessment as opposed to anybody else.
A survey suggests that satisfaction with the NHS is at an all-time low, with only 24% of people who took part in England, Wales and Scotland saying they were happy with the service. The results of the long-running British Social Attitudes Survey found that people were particularly displeased with accident and emergency and dentistry care. The government says it's bringing down waiting lists. New figures show a 54% increase in the number of times sewage was discharged into rivers and seas in England in 2023 compared with the previous year. The Environment Agency said it was a very wet year and extra monitors had been installed at overflow sites. It said water companies still had a legal duty to limit spills. The campaigners River Action say the stretch of the Thames being used for the Oxford and Cambridge boat race this weekend has what it describes an alarmingly high level of E. coli bacteria from sewage. It's warning rowers and supporters to cover up cuts and grazes and avoid getting water on them. BBC News. In an hour's time, a baffling online scam involving a dehumidifier and one woman's journey to return it at 11 here on Radio 4. First though, it's time to join Woman's Hour with Nella McGovern.
Hello and welcome to Women's Hour. Did you see this headline this morning? Up to 8 million UK jobs are at risk from the rise of artificial intelligence, or AI. It's according to a report that has the warning that women and young people will be the most affected. Well, we're going to drill down into the details of that in a moment. Also, over the weekend, the Taliban Supreme Leader called for women to be stoned to death for adultery. We're going to hear why this pronouncement has come now, and we will speak to the woman who was the first female deputy speaker of Afghanistan's parliament. She has led the country like so many others. You'll also hear about the impact of Kay Benbow's career. She was a trailblazer in children's TV. Sadly, Kay died yesterday at the age of 63. So we'll hear about the significance of what she achieved, and we're also asking you, what role does, or did, children's TV play in your life? Was it an educator? Was it a nanny? Was it a companion? Was it something else? And I wonder, how it plays with screens now, other types of screens that are in our world. So I want your messages on that. 84844 is how you text the programme. On social media, we're at BBC Women's Hour, or you can email us through our website. For WhatsApp and voice notes, that number is 03700 100 444. For old-fashioned texts, 84844. Now, we also have a beautiful performance coming up for you later this hour. I was sitting in on part of the sound check of the jazz singer Sarah McFarlane. She is celebrating the centenary of the legendary jazz singer Sarah. It was the Institute for Public Policy Research, the IPPR, which published that report that says almost 8 million UK jobs could be lost to AI in a jobs apocalypse. That is a warning also that women and younger workers could be most at risk from automation. But is it really all doom and gloom as those figures might suggest? I'm joined now by Karsten Young, one of the authors and an IPPR senior economist. Also back with us, Professor Gina Neff, Executive Director of the Mindrew Centre for Technology and Democracy. She's based at the University of Cambridge. Welcome to both of you to Women's Hour. Let me begin with you, Karsten. This 8 million jobs, is that worst case scenario? And how did you come up with that figure?
So the 8 million jobs figure is looking a few years down the line, where current AI technology that already exists is deeply integrated in the technology, in the economy, but it's also a worst case scenario.
Okay.
And we make very clear that, you know, if we do the right things now, government, unions, employers, then we can completely avoid this and actually boost the economy without losing jobs.
So let me turn to Gina for a moment. When you saw that headline, you're like, yes, that could happen or likely to happen. What was your reaction?
Well, yes, and, right? That, what we welcome about this report is that it lays out what could happen and what we need to do to prepare society to make sure it doesn't happen. We are hearing a lot of fear-mongering and a lot of crazy headlines around AI and work. And what I appreciate about this study that has just come out is that it lays out 3 pathways. And yes, the headline gripping one is the worst case scenario, but the report lays out what we can do to make sure we don't get there.
So let's get into that. Karsten, what do you think could lead us to the best case scenario?
First of all, I think everyone should, unions, governments, employers should really think through what this technology could do to their business, and make strategies for making sure that we don't blindly automate people away, even if the technology would theoretically allow it, and really think about how can we adopt this technology in a way that aids work, that aids employees to do their job better. So I think, first of all, I think this will be a new era of relevance for unions, because they will be key in helping manage this transition on the ground. And I'll say one other thing is that, you know, we have a lot of need for work in the economy that goes unaddressed. You know, in the healthcare system, in the social care system, people are rationing the amount of time they have with patients and with people that are being cared for. Actually using this technology to free up people to have more time for customers, for people they look after, that would be a fantastic thing. So really steering the use of technology and freeing up work for those important tasks, I think that's really a positive vision.
It's interesting you say that, Karsten. We were hearing in the headlines just a few minutes ago about the levels of dissatisfaction when it came to healthcare services within the country. But with this is Women's Hour, and in the report it says that women and young people are most likely to be affected. Gina, how do you see that, or for somebody listening to that perhaps thinks, my job could probably be automated, how do you stave that off? The unions is one thing, says Karsten.
Well, absolutely. Listen, there's the best economic research we have suggests that there will be net job gains from this wave of AI. But that doesn't mean that some people won't lose their jobs, and what we know for certain is that tasks, the kinds of work we do in a job, is going to really change, and that's going to affect lots of us. What I think is important for women to remember is that we have to make sure of 2 things. One, that we're not increasing today's existing digital gaps. So we absolutely have to make sure that we're increasing lifelong learning, we're working on supporting women and others and upskilling and reskilling, and that we're thinking about these changes through the whole life cycle of jobs. So one of the reasons why we worry about young workers is, are we automating away some of the tasks that new entrants into labor markets have been doing? And so we need to make sure that we're doing appropriate job training and job skills so that we don't completely pull up those job ladders, keeping young people off. So I think for listeners, we need to make sure that people are aware that there are things that they can individually do to make sure that they are more employable as these waves come. We outlined those in a study 2 years ago for International Women's Day, in a study that my team did with UNESCO, OECD, and the Inter-American Development Bank. And we took a global approach. And so this isn't a problem that's just in the UK. We really need to be thinking about women around the world, young people around the world, and how we're going to make sure that we've got good jobs going forward.
Can you give us some concrete examples of the sort of jobs that might be at risk and what way a person could upskill?
Well, for example, and to be completely fair, this is from the company that the funder, the philanthropy that backs my research at Cambridge, the Minderoo Foundation. The funder works in mining, in heavy mining, and they automated much of the trucking that takes ore from very far away to local centers where it can be processed. And by putting ore on these automated vehicles, they actually created women's work. So they took jobs that had been dirty, messy, and you had to fly far away from your family in order to drive these vehicles. It was not appealing to women, to jobs that were actually office jobs, controlling and operating these vehicles. So we worry about things that, as Karsten said, that have high rates of mundane and routine tasks that are easily automatable. But on the other hand, when we free that work up, we create new opportunities. For example, in construction, an industry that I studied very closely, more women have gotten involved in the construction planning work that now can happen not on construction sites, but it happens in office-based work. So that planning work, we automated some tasks, but we freed up work to allow people to create new products and services that they sold to the buyers of building services.
I'd be curious for your thoughts on this, both of you. Gemma from Paisley got in touch, who's been thinking about AI, and she's written a book on it actually for teachers, how to lighten the workload. She says, I don't think anyone will be replaced by AI, but people may be replaced by people who know how to use AI. You're nodding your head, Gina.
I think that's spot on. We know in the economy at this moment, skilled trades workers who understand how to work with digital systems are highly in demand. That's not going to change. We also know that a lot of the kinds of caring work that have traditionally attracted women into positions, we know that many of those jobs aren't going to disappear. We're not going to get rid of the human touch, so to speak. So what we need to make sure is that women have the skills to be able to go into the positions with confidence and security that they can work with those systems and that they can be the human in the loop that will just supercharge many of these kinds of jobs coming forward.
Just taking another part of Gemma's point, she says teachers especially need to understand AI as young people will use it, and it'll be a fast changing landscape to keep up with, and we do know of course some of the industries that women can be employed in more than men. Back to you though, Karsten, what have you seen? What areas do you think are already affected that we begin to see that change taking place, certain jobs gone and others coming in perhaps?
So, unlike past waves of automation, where we think of robots in factories and have tended to affect men a little bit more, this time I think it's likely more back office jobs and office type jobs, because the new technology that we're seeing is quite good at reading text, drafting emails, working with databases, working in compliance. So, some of the jobs we see could be affected in the very near term are things like customer service professional jobs. There's already, examples of companies that successfully deployed AI for about 700 customer engagement employees instead of them in their work responding to customer queries. So these kind of jobs where basically you sit on a computer and you respond to things, you enter things in databases, AI is probably going to be quite good at deploying that. But one thing I think connecting to the teaching example, I think that's one we talk about as well, is that we can make decisions about what we want to be automated or not. We could automate education and just have students play with chatbots, and we know that they're actually quite good, these chatbots. But we can also go for a different scenario where we say, let's have AI, say, help teachers grade multiple choice tests or simple tests by students, and then free up teacher time to think more about student needs and engage more directly.
So interesting, almost a parallel there perhaps, Carsten, with healthcare systems as well. Very briefly, Gina, you've been working on a parliamentary bill on AI and employment to be introduced on April 10th. Also thinking back to Carsten's comments about unions kind of gearing up for this AI shift. What can you tell us about the potential impact of that then?
Yes, so April 18th has been keen to push for AI and employment, so watch the space. We will be talking about it more. An AI and employment bill essentially would help us think through how do we make the existing labor law fit for purpose. Right now we know there's a lot of issues and challenges of discrimination and bias in AI systems. These can really affect women and young entrants into the labor market if they're not used appropriately. Who has the liability and responsibility when these systems don't work fairly and appropriately? We want to make sure that we address that in UK law.
Interesting. We'll continue talking. Professor Gina Neff, Executive Director of the Mindrew Centre for Technology and Democracy at the University of Cambridge. Also, Carsten Young, one of the authors of that report from the IPPR. Thanks very much. In a way, perhaps a tangent. We're talking about children's TV a little bit later in the programme. Lots of you getting in touch already about how you used it. Lee says, children's TV was one of the wonders to me as a child. A treat when it was pelting down at the break during school, Asian after school, the things I learned to make with my sticky back plastic, and an entertainment meted out on a weekly basis. I love Skippy the Bush Kangaroo and irritated my family with my fake Aussie accent. 84844. We're going to be speaking about the life of Kate Bembo, who had a massive impact on children's television, and also how do you use it? And let's be honest here, right? Do you plonk the kids down in front of it as a babysitter when you're trying to get on with something else, or you just need a little break? Has the tablet or the laptop or the phone taken over where the TV used to be? I want to hear it all. 84844. Right, I want to turn to Afghanistan next, where the leader of the Taliban has been defending flogging and the whipping of women in front of crowds, even going as far as saying stoning should take place if, in fact, there is adultery that has happened. In a voice recording that was played on state TV over the weekend, Mullah Hayatullah Akhundzada said that wives who commit adultery will face public execution in this manner. It also coincides with the 900-day mark since girls were first banned from attending school. So we're asking, what sort of future do women of Afghanistan have? Earlier today, I spoke to Fazia Kufi. She is the former Deputy Speaker of the Afghan Parliament. She was the first woman to hold that position. And she came to the UK, like so many others, when the Taliban took over back in 2021. I started by asking her about this latest announcement from the Taliban's Supreme Leader.
Mullah Hayatullah has been relatively very vocal on his position about women. So if you listen to every statements he has made, or every appearance, we haven't had his face public appearance so far, but every voice appearance he had, the two things that he attacked and continuously put pressure is the relationship of Taliban with international community and their measures against women. So in the last audio recording also, he emphasized on the fact that they fought for 20 years with the international community. They will continue to fight if the international community try to pressurize them to change their principles. And their principles, we know, is very unique to them. What they do, especially on women's rights and human rights, is not very common in other, or not common at all in other Muslim countries. He went on to say, now they will, nobody can pressurize them. If they publicly execute women, they will continue to publicly stone women and enforce death penalty and death punishment. My worry is, and the fear that women of Afghanistan have been sharing with me since the last 3 days, is that the foot soldiers on the ground, they will actually be even further repressive on their measures. And in the absence of any protection for women, any laws that protect women, this could be really affecting women even with minor, crime or irregularities.
And do we know what sort of crimes? I mean, I mentioned adultery there, but is that the sort of crime that is expected to be quoted in the use of this sort of punishment, of stoning?
So according to Islamic principles, 2 crimes could get death punishment: adultery, and then if you commit murder of somebody and the family does not pardon you. But in general, the laws in Afghanistan, like the civil code, the law on violence against women that we tabled in the parliament in 2014 and 2013, all of that protects women, protects human being, because the whole purpose of the law is to bring regularities. But since the Taliban came to power, they abolished the laws that protect women. They abolished or very little women lawyers. So women who actually are even victim of anything, they don't feel to go to the courts, and even if they are victim, they are regarded as guilty, because every woman in Afghanistan is guilty for Taliban. Even if it's a small crime, they can get that punishment. Especially, my concern is for women protesters, women activists. That is very difficult to prove who has committed adultery, and they can misuse that.
You feel it will be used even when there is no proof?
And I mean, also, at the end of the day, he is the leader of Taliban.